Hello, and welcome to this Funds Europe webinar in partnership with Jersey Finance. My name is Stephanie Baxter. I'm a financial journalist at Rotate Media, and I will be moderating today's webinar. The topic we'll be discussing today is a very important one, women in alternatives. We'll be hearing today about how gender diversity has improved in the alternatives industry and the wider financial industry, and what else needs to be done going forward. Our panel of amazing women today will be telling us about their experiences in the industry and how they have gotten to where they are now in their senior roles. We'll also hear about the hurdles and challenges that they've had to overcome during their careers. And despite recent improvements in gender diversity, there are still barriers that need to be removed. We will look at the steps that need to be taken to improve this. For example, while the COVID pandemic helped women in terms of raising the importance of flexible hours and working from home, the industry still has to do so much more to help women with childcare responsibilities, for example. We'll also be discussing why mentoring and career development are absolutely critical to improving gender diversity in the industry. So that leaves me to give a very warm welcome to our speakers on today's webinar. First of all, we have Teresa Durso, who is partner and CEO of Berry Street Capital. We also have Zena Couppey, who is CEO of Altum Group, and Nicola Brocq, who is director and UK lead at Jersey Finance, who is our host for today. Unfortunately, Nadine Buckland of the Zenzic Capital has some technical issues, so was not able to join us today. Right, and just before we start, I just want to remind the audience, at the end of our webinar, we'll be holding a Q&A session where you can ask questions to our speakers. So if you have a burning question to ask them, please post one on the platform and we will answer it at the end of the webinar during the Q&A session. So to start off our webinar, I'd like to ask our host, Nicola, to give us an introduction to Jersey Finance and explain why we're talking about women in alternatives today. Over to you, Nicola.
Thanks, Stephanie. Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Nicola Brocq, and I'm a London-based director at Jersey Finance, which is the promotional body for the financial services industry in Jersey. I'm the UK lead for funds and corporate services, and my role is firstly to help define Jersey's product offering and strategy, and secondly, to put Jersey on the map by telling people about it. Before we hear from our panel, I would like to give you a quick overview of Jersey as a finance centre and then finish off with some background to this webinar to help set the scene. The island of Jersey is culturally diverse and has a rich heritage. It has also long been regarded as a jurisdiction of choice for private funds, alternative investments, and structuring around corporate transactions. Its tax-neutral stance and stable governance makes it straightforward and attractive jurisdiction for fund managers and investors. It has a lot of substance too. In fact, 14% of the total population work in the financial services industry. So there is a huge knowledge base and a skilled workforce behind it, which enables the delivery of high quality services to a global client base. This webinar was born from an initiative that I set in 2023 to connect more women within my London and Jersey network. Partly because in my role of business development, I want to make sure that I provide women with the same amount of opportunities as men. While that is important to me, it's difficult because there are a lot more men in our industry than there are women. I also believe women need to support other women, especially when we are the minority in the room. That said, I think it should be done without being exclusive or segregating ourselves. The fact is, gender equality still has a long way to go, and it's up to us to keep talking about that. In the alternatives industry, gender divide is showing marginal improvement. A study by Preqin showed that female employees versus total employees in the hedge fund industry stands at over 25% now. Compare that in 2019 to under 20%. Other sectors, such as private equity, venture cap, and real estate, have similar marginal improvements, but it's still not. In addition to increasing the number of women in the industry, I think talking about the seniority gap and the pay gap should be a priority. There is not going to be a reduction in the pay gap until we give women the right environment to step up and take senior roles and higher paid roles. The World Bank recently reported that in the financial sector, women account for only 29% of leadership roles. With regards to the gender pay gap, this unfortunately remains at 12% in the UK. Earlier this year, the FT analysis using government data reported that around 80% of UK employees on average pay men more than women. And the industries who are the worst offenders are finance and education. I have no doubt hearing Zena, Nadine, and Teresa's journey to the top will provide insight and inspiration to others. And I'm really looking forward to today's discussion. But I hope that we will all continue to spark conversations, ask those questions, and challenge the status quo long after this webinar comes to a close. Thanks for your time, and I'll now pass back to Stephanie.
Thanks very much, Nikki. No, that was really, really great setting the scene and some really, really interesting piece of information there and stats. And just want to give a welcome to Nadine. Thank you for joining us. She had some connection issues earlier. So
yeah, certainly. No problem. Sorry about that.
That's okay. No, it's great to have you here. No, thank you. So now what I'd like to do is I'd like to ask Nadine, Teresa, and Zena to all sort of introduce themselves a little bit more and talk a little bit about their respective businesses and what they do. So perhaps if I could ask Teresa to go first, please.
Sure. Hi, I'm Teresa, and I am a partner and the CEO of Berry Street Capital Management. We are an event-driven merger hedge fund that launched in 2019. A challenging few years, given that we launched a mere few months, our fund and our managed account a mere few months before the pandemic hit. So perhaps not the best timing in terms of markets and obviously launching a new business. And trying to create sort of a team. But we have got our heads down and continue forward and are where we are now. In terms of my role, I run the non-investment team and focus on all of the non-investment operations on the business side. I was appointed as a CEO towards the end of last year to also focus on, I guess, the business strategy and growth going forward. So that's really my focus, the non-investment side of the business and hopefully looking towards growth, both business side and also focused on the team and ensuring that the environment that we work in is fostering the best collaborative environment for the team and new people that join us going forward. That's me. And thank you again for having me, to Nicola and Stephanie for moderating.
Thank you very much. Zena, over to you next.
Hi, well, thank you very much for having me today. I'm delighted to be able to join a panel with such amazing women. I'm Zena Couppey. I'm the CEO of Altum. We are a boutique fund administration business focused on servicing the alternative industry. We provide fund administration, corporate and family office solutions to a global client base. We've got around 30 billion of assets under management, and we're about 130 people. We're focused on delivering services in Europe currently. I joined about 3 years ago, took over the role as CEO over a year ago now. Time flies. My role primarily is focused on our strategic vision, ensuring seamless delivery of our service across our multiple jurisdictions, but also our culture and talent management. So we pride ourselves on being a people-focused business. People are our greatest asset. So a lot of my time is spent with our staff and looking at acquiring more talent as we grow. We're pretty unique in our offering, and we are very, very focused on our diversity. It's something that's pretty core to me. Our top co-board, amazingly, is 60% female, and we have an amazing chair, Baroness Helena Morrissey. So I'm very fortunate myself to have a great mentor. So delighted to be able to share my views today.
Lovely. Thanks very much, Zena. And Nadine.
Yeah, hi, I'm Nadine Buckland. I co-founded Zenzic Capital around 10 years ago. Slightly different in role, I guess, on a day-to-day basis, albeit I guess I should very much be kind of front and centre on leading the growth of the development of the individuals within the business. I also am very focused on the front office side of our business. So we are an opportunistic credit real estate investment firm. We have around 200 million of assets under management and growing. So we're seen as an emerging manager. We started off life as a advisory business, sell-side advisory business, and we are now fully focused only on being a principal investor. So we made the migration away from advisory into investment around 3 years ago now. I sit on all investment committees. We have 2 strategies, and my role is a lot focused on origination and on the capital raising requirements for the business. But of course, you know, in my leadership role within the business and sitting on the board of Zenzic, clearly a big part of my day-to-day also has to be thinking about the staff that I have working for me and my co-founder Tom, and also absolutely in the same as the other ladies on this panel, looking at how we can attract new talent, how we can retain our talent, and making sure that the work experience is a positive one for all our employees.
Lovely, thanks very much, Nadine. Great, no, thank you to all of you for doing these introductions. Really great to hear a bit about your businesses and what you do. Okay, so I still want to kick off with the main part of our webinar, and this first question I'd like to put to Zena, if that's okay. So Zena, to what extent do you think gender diversity has improved in the alternatives industry in recent years, and what do you think has driven that?
Well, I'm pleased to say that I definitely think it's improved. I mean, a lot of my time's been spent in the real estate industry, and you certainly see more women at events, and you deal with more women on a day-to-day basis. So I think there's been improvement. I actually was discussing it with my chair earlier today. She was chair of the 30% Club. When she started in 2009, there was less than 9% of representation of women on boards. It's now improved today. But she was telling me she's also chair of the Diversity Project, which is about getting more females into fund management. And Citywire just produced a report, actually, it's called the Alpha Female Report. And unfortunately, since 2000, and I think they said 16, when it was 10.3% representation, it's only grown today to 12%, and that's 12% globally, but also 12% in the UK. So we're not making huge steps forward. And I think there's still a lot more to be done. We certainly seem to be breaking through the molds at the mid-tier, and then losing people towards the top. So I think a lot of that comes down to providing the right working environment for women wanting to come back, because coming back from maternity as a mother of 2 very small children, a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old, is not easy. And I think that's often where we lose women, not having enough support, not having enough flexibility, not giving them enough options. And it's certainly something that we've got to work harder at in order to entice women to come back and to want to back themselves to go into these senior roles. So I think that's the biggest challenge for us.
Great, no, thank you, Zena. And Teresa, what about you? You know, what do you think gender diversity has improved in the industry? And yeah, what are your thoughts?
I think as Zena said, that it's certainly improved. The stats don't, I guess, show necessarily what I have seen myself, and it just might have been my experience. Certainly, you know, 15, 20 years ago, I had joined in consulting, and back then I think there was no women at all that I, you know, any of the hedge fund or private equity companies that I consulted, you know, was a consultant to. But now, not, you know, I think you're seeing a lot more women in CEO functions, head of EMEA, head of US, head of what have you, and many of them that I know. Now maybe it's a generational thing where as each kind of generation, that comes up, we sort of start seeing them grow. Like we've seen, I don't know, Jean at Wellington, who's now the CEO, and she sort of worked her way up, and that seems to have been the case for a number of the female CEOs who have frankly worked themselves up through the rungs until becoming, that top of either the business or the department that they're in. And I guess to some extent that was the same case for me. So I'm hoping that with time we'll see that more come through more in the stats. But certainly I personally have seen a big change in the amount of women that I look up to and inspire myself, both at the same sort of age group, if you like, as well as older as well. So I'm hoping that, the next 10, 15 years we'll actually start seeing that come through in the stats a bit more as well.
Great. No, thank you, Teresa. And Nadine, what are your thoughts on the improvements that we've seen in the industry with gender diversity?
I think that, Teresa and I, for example, met very recently on a women's networking breakfast, which I think is one of the many things that I've seen probably over the last 3 to 4 years grow. Obviously, COVID didn't help with, helping to push the networking opportunities for women in the alternative investment space. But certainly post-COVID, I've seen a number of third-party advisory firms, lawyers especially, really trying to push the opportunities for women in the sector to meet, and obviously other groups as well, more individual sort of small boutique groups that have joined forces, women that want to create networks, which I think before wouldn't have necessarily been as supported by senior management and now are. So my experience has been over the last couple of years, there's certainly been more opportunity for me to meet with like-minded women in different parts of the sector, from more junior to more senior. And that's certainly opened up opportunities for mentoring people that perhaps I wouldn't have met, because obviously my business is actually, relatively small. We're 20-something staff, I haven't got the opportunity to kind of look up to anybody more senior than me in a large corporate environment. So for me, it's really important to have the opportunity to meet those sort of more senior females that are experiencing some of the either positives or negatives that I see in the industry day to day. So my personal view is it's certainly improved. I think the stats, it is a difficult one. Like Zena, I have a 4 and a 5-year-old. If you can't hear, that's great, because I'm in a cafe in Cornwall at the moment, holidaying with my 2 children, and obviously joining the panel because it was something that's really important to me. So I wanted to make the effort to do that. And I think that's part of it. I think it's all about, at the moment, trying to see, women who are living living normal lives, like, I am today, and trying to, plug in the opportunities of sharing sort of experiences together. So yeah, I mean, I think it's a difficult one for me to see exactly what the market's done, because, as I say, the business is quite small, and I'm not, watching the BlackRocks and the Blackstones of this world. Those guys are, not relevant as much to me on a day-to-day basis. But my personal experience is that every time I go to a conference, it feels like there's more women in attendance, there's more women on the panels. So, hopefully, all in all, it has certainly been a positive uptick, even if it's not been a huge one yet.
Yeah, that sounds really, really promising. Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. And welcome back to Nikki. Yes, you're back.
What happened there? Sorry about that.
That's okay, don't worry. Okay, great. So we'll go on to our next question, and I'm going to go with Zena to ask her this first. Zena, what's been your experience as a woman in the alternatives industry? If you think about, across your whole career.
Yeah, I mean, I started in financial services at a tender age of 16. So I have grown up in financial services. So I've been the trainee, I've been the senior administrator, I've been the associate director. So I have had to do all of the things that we ask of different levels. So I've seen all of it. So and it's changed a lot. And I guess Gen Z has a lot to do with that as well. I mean, I was laughing the other day saying, God, as a trainee, I used to get people's dry cleaning. I'd be asked to do this, I'd be asked to do that. And it's a totally different world now that we're in, and what people expect is different and what people will tolerate is different. So I think COVID had a massive impact on what's important to people and what they really want. And I think the way they're treated at work and aligning themselves to firms that are authentic and really do what they say is key. So during my career, I've had some really positive influences where I've had some great male mentors, and I've had some situations that they're not okay, you know, they're not, I was treated differently, you know, I was treated differently because I was a young, dynamic female in a very male-dominated environment. But I would say that all of them are learnings, and you learn from them, you take strength from them, you become a lot more resilient as a person, and you act as more authentic in the way you do things. So things that perhaps you tolerated, you wouldn't allow others to tolerate. And I'm pretty strict on that from a culture point of view. I make sure we are walking the walk. We're not just doing marketing about gender diversity and flexible working and free voice. We do that. Like that is our firm. People are able to say and have equal opportunities. That's really important, and that's something that I've lived through and realized it's really important. So on the whole, good and bad, but they've made me a better and stronger individual. So nothing negative from me in that respect.
Lovely, thank you. And to Teresa, what's been your experience in the alternatives or wider financial services industry, and perhaps, you know, some of the things that you know, some challenges that you had to overcome during that time, or things that you picked up on over those years?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, my background was law, and actually one of the reasons I didn't pursue law was because, and it was just one of the reasons, was that at the time that also felt like there was some sort of gender issues that I personally felt. So I fell into, if you like, consulting with this legal kind of background, having qualified as a barrister, and actually, in terms of the business that I worked at, it was mostly male dominated, but I felt like part of the team, so I suppose it was a bit of a boys group because it was mostly men. But the CEO of that business didn't treat any of the women any differently, and I really mean that. So I actually think I got lucky because he sort of championed me in my consulting years, and then I got sort of taken in-house to my first hedge fund, Paulson & Co. And my boss, if you like, there, Stuart Mirza, he was in the US, he was a GC, and he also championed me. So I think actually for me, I've been very lucky that, interestingly, the males that were my bosses at the time really championed and supported me for what I hope was my capabilities at the time. So I didn't have as much of the I guess, gender issues in my roles. What I did see more in the consulting period when I was quite young was that when I went to, as I said before, private equity funds, fund of funds, hedge funds, and I was the advisor, I would often be the only female sort of presenting my compliance report to well, entirely male board. You know, on one occasion, I think I've given this example before, of a huge table in a huge boardroom of, I think, 12 men, all easily over the age of 60, and me being sort of mid-20s, I think, and sitting there sort of shaking. One, feeling very outnumbered on the gender side, but also, you know, you're quite young and you're quite insecure. So I think it was also, I think it's also been a learning curve for me to perhaps manage my own fear in those situations and my own, sorry to quote Harry here, but unconscious bias around, you know, what I think people are looking, when people are looking at me, what they're thinking, and me making an assumption of that. Because actually, nobody was rude, nobody said anything, but I just felt that way. And so I think there's two things. There's one is how we perceive ourselves and us having the confidence to, us being women, looking at ourselves in a certain way, but also making sure that the men that are around us, as I said in my case, I've been very lucky that the people that have championed me along the way have actually been men. My two partners now, Walker and Mark, are incredible partners and supportive in my role, and always have been. And I've never felt that being a female has detracted from that. So again, maybe I've been lucky in terms of my actual jobs, but I've certainly felt that when I've spoken externally to, like I say, other hedge funds, other fund of funds, private equity, other people in the alternative space.
Lovely, thanks very much, Teresa. And Nadine, what about you? What's your experience in the industry and sort of across your whole career, and any sort of challenges that you came across along the way as a woman?
Yeah, I said in a recent interview actually that I think I have been relatively fortunate in that my career through its time in financial services, and I worked in a variety of different businesses before I formed Zenzic, was quite positive. In actual fact, in all circumstances, I had male leadership, and definitely took a number of positives from that experience. I think mainly because a lot of the time my roles were quite focused on origination or capital raising. You have to have quite a strength of personality for that. So they were very much sort of behind me as a character, speaking into the market and meeting with people. Obviously, you have to sort of have confidence in order to be able to deliver in those roles. And so I guess where I was relatively fortunate to be successful utilizing that side of my personality, I was always very well supported. What I would say is I have seen the flip side of it, though, for the individuals in the businesses that were actually, rather than male, and having sort of male bosses, and in a number of circumstances saw a lot of the younger analysts or more junior staff coming through, and they found it sometimes with their sort of more senior male bosses quite a challenge to impress, quite ego driven in some scenarios, and actually I felt that I got almost easier ride than some of the guys that were my counterparts doing a similar role to me. So I think that this diversity point, it is important, obviously, that that women get given a fair ride in the workplace alongside their male counterparts. But my experience personally has been that actually I definitely experienced in some cases some more positive aspects of that environment than some of my co-workers. So yeah, I mean, I think it's all about who you report to, the type of individual, how supportive they are. I was fortunate that a lot of the guys that I worked for, they were fathers. They were fathers to younger girls, and I think that sometimes, if a man has a couple of daughters or a daughter, they start to sort of see the world slightly differently. Perhaps if they were a different person before their children were born, they start to think, actually, if this was my daughter in a senior position in the business, how would I want her treated? How would I want to support her? And I've talked a lot about that with men in senior leadership positions around, how that might influence their thinking. So yeah, I think probably luck of the draw a little bit for me, but at the same time, I think more can be done, obviously, constantly, to ensure that women are supported in their growth in the workplace.
Yeah, no, great answer, Nadine. No, thank you very much for sharing that. Great. So obviously, it's been great hearing about all of your experiences over your career, and I'd just like to touch a little bit now on, what, yes, that gender diversity has improved, and I know Nadine said it sort of depends on your own particular experience, but what barriers are there still to overcome for women in the alternatives industry? I don't know if, Teresa, you might want to sort of set some of those barriers out that you think we still need to tackle.
Yeah, I mean, I think, as we've said, it may depend on the role and the nature of the individual. I think personally, I imagine that for most, and this includes me, the biggest challenge is the sort of family work-life balance. And in my case, that's exacerbated slightly by a large commute, having, not living in London. And so I think juggling a senior role with family life is challenging. I do think that there are still some sort of preconceived ideas around sort of presenteeism, if you like, in the industry. And so I think that's probably the biggest challenge that we need to think about. That, and to a certain degree, the mental support that you might need behind that, because it is a pressure that I think, and it's not always just women. So I have to say that I don't want to generalize it. It is just women, because I'm sure there are men that also feel the same. This constant struggle of wanting to be, I guess, the best, in my case, maybe mother, and also the best CEO, and run the business to the best of my ability, but feel that I'm present for the staff as well, but also present for my children at home. And often when I look at senior women in the industry, I mean really senior women in the industry, my sense is, how are they doing it without giving up a little bit on one or the other? And so for me, I think that really is a big challenge. And I'm not sure. I don't have a solution entirely to that. But I think that's definitely a big hurdle.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. Thank you, Teresa. And what about you, Zena? What perhaps are there any other barriers that you perceive, or just kind of you picking up on what Teresa's just been talking about?
Yeah, I mean, obviously you have mum guilt. I think that's every female and every male. I mean, I see it with my partner. He's away from the kids 3 days a week. He's the same, and it's finding boundaries and not comparing yourself to others, just finding a plan that works for you as an individual and you as a family. But having the confidence to share what you really want with your employer and letting them try and help you get there. So you're going to have a baby, you need a year off. That doesn't mean your career has to end. It just means for the next year, your focus is going to be on your child. And you can come back, you can have a fulfilling career, but it looks a bit like this. And, not expecting a woman to come back 9 to 5 days a week in order to be able to progress. Making flexible arrangements, giving them support. A big thing we do, mentoring, giving them confidence. Women don't necessarily lean in the way a man does for a promotion. They don't have that confidence. They don't just say, yes, I'm ready. They're much more conservative. They're much more risk averse. They need a bit more support, a bit more encouragement, I think, is the biggest thing. And they need a sense of realism, like it's not easy. And it's okay if you don't make it to the top, as long as you're happy, So I think that's the thing I always say. Everyone always says, how do you do it? I don't lie. I have a full-time nanny that helps me, but that works for me, but it might not work for everybody. And I think showing them that there are some days where you're going to nail it and it's amazing, but other days I come in the office and it's an absolute car crash. And I think people seeing that you're real, you have a real life, and the struggles are real is really important. I think that's my take on it.
Yeah, sorry, yeah.
I was just going to say, I think that's right. I think it's showing the reality that it's possible, and that you create whatever works for you. Because I think each person's personal and work lives are going to be individual to them, and I think that's the right way to look at it. Just what works for you, what makes you happy, in order to achieve your personal and work goals. I agree.
Thank you. And just quickly remind the audience, if you do have any questions that you'd like to ask our wonderful speakers, do post your questions on the platform, and we'll ask them at the end of the webinar. So now I want to sort of talk a little bit about the COVID pandemic, and I want to about the impact that this has had in raising the importance of flexible hours and working from home, and obviously this suits very much women with childcare responsibilities. Just wanted to ask Nadine, to what extent do you think the COVID pandemic has sort of helped that sort of bring those issues more to attention at companies, and support women more when they have children?
I think it's what it has definitely done is allowed a bit more of a balance for both women and men to prioritize family responsibility alongside work. So my personal experience of this is that prior to COVID occurring, my husband was required into the office 5 days a week. He'd be, home every evening, sort of 7:30 or later. And so, we had the nanny then, we still have the nanny now, but at that time, neither myself or my husband would really see the children, other than maybe the early hours of the morning before going to work. We certainly would never do bedtime. My husband's environment means that, to be honest, he is more often present at home for my children where I can't be. He has had that opportunity provided to him by his business, which is a much larger firm in the financial services sector than certainly Zenzic. I think that what I think has been an interesting one for me is it's this work-life balance commentary that we read about, regularly, and we've just spoken about a moment ago, because I suppose my view on this is that, the barriers to entry that we were talking about a moment ago are less so there for the younger community of generation coming through who are, wanting to take up roles within financial services. I think those opportunities are there for women in the alternative space as much as they are for men. I think that it's back to the very first comments we were saying about sort of senior leadership roles, and how do you encourage those women to continue their careers post having children. And certainly I think COVID has enabled I suppose the market to see maybe more readily, because they've been on Zoom calls where 300 children pile in, that actually, working as a female in a senior role and looking after a family is actually really tough, and yet enjoyable. I wouldn't want to change it. I wouldn't want to give up, my business in favour of being at home with my children. That suits some people, doesn't suit everybody. For me personally, I need the drive that my business, gives me every day. And that's something I want my children to see as well in me as an individual. But COVID certainly has meant that I think more men in senior leadership roles have seen how that juggle, how the difficulties, can be presented themselves quite quickly for women with a sick child or whatever it might be. And actually what COVID has done is meant that, it's not necessarily always the woman that needs to stay at home with their daughter or son if they're sick. The husband can do the same, or their partner can do the same. And so, yeah, from my perspective, I think that's the kind of positives that perhaps COVID has generated for a lot of women in the sector.
Thanks very much, Nadine. And great. That brings me on to my next question. It's still sort of touching on this childcare thing, and this that work-life balance. And Zena, I just want to ask you, what do you think the financial services sector could do to help support women more? Help them manage their careers when having children and returning to work.
I think having open and honest discussions with them during their pregnancy, and working with them on what they really want, and not making them feel bad if they want to take a year or 6 months, or they want to come back, and making them realize that everyone's journey is unique to them. And just because the maternity policy says you can do this or do that, that doesn't mean you have to do it. I love it. At ours now, we have men taking more time than the women, which I find great. And they really, there seems a much more equilibrium between men and women in terms of their households from COVID. My husband, I don't think, did a bath time before, COVID, and now he's there at least 3 times a week. He loves it. He clears his diary. That's his time, even though he's a really busy CEO as well. I think that's really good. But I think when you come to getting them to feel confident, if someone, I mean, me personally, I felt like I'd lost an arm when I had my first child, because I was still on my BlackBerry 10 minutes before I was supposed to be having the baby. I was told off, you know, and to like not work was really like, what am I going to do? And I'm going to be off for a few months and I'm going to lose myself. And like to actually have someone that I could talk to through that supported me and said, it's a big change, but you'll come back and you'll be the same person and you'll go on to do really great things if you want to. But if you don't want to, that's equally okay. And I think that's really the big thing. I have seen the other side where it's not like that for everyone, and they say, oh, come back, it will all be fine. And they come back and it isn't fine. And that person gets depressed and it affects their whole life. So, you know, like I'm a big believer in honesty and transparency when it comes to helping women. And also, you know, that goes two ways. You know, you can't have someone that wants to work from home but doesn't want any childcare, but they're working from home. It's, you know, it's an equilibrium. You have to find the right balance. But I think if women feel supported, they feel encouraged, they're going to give 120%. So you as an employer are going to gain. When they feel anxious and they don't feel part of the team, that's when, you know, they lose all interest. And, you know, I've seen some amazing females that now they're a mum and that's what they want to do. But I think if they'd had more support, they could have done both. So we always try and make sure that we're providing as much support, as much flexibility. So some people take all their maternity in one go, some don't, some take 3, then they come back for 6, then they take another 3. So I think that's really important. That's the biggest thing.
Lovely, thank you, Zena, and Teresa. So if we talked quite a bit about childcare, work-life balance, but if we just think about the other things that the financial industry could do more to help support women in their careers. So whether or not they go on to have children, and perhaps also looking at it from when they supporting them from quite an early stage in their careers.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've said before that, I think the mentoring at the junior level, I think there's a lot more of that, certainly than when I was younger. You get a lot of financial institutions that will come along to the sort of university fairs and places like that now. So I think there is a lot more opportunity for the younger generation to be more involved and to hear more about the financial services industry, and hopefully, it goes from there. I've recently been involved in a charity called GAIN, who help mentor young girls and sort of provide them with opportunities, mentoring, internships, that kind of thing. And I met some of the students there, and they're incredibly bright girls with amazing futures ahead of them. But I just think conceptually this is an amazing thing. I wish there was something like this when I was younger, where they can meet women who are or have gone through some of these struggles, are in senior roles, there's someone there that they can look up to, if you like, or actually their saying is, if you can't see her, you can't be her. And I love that, because I think knowing that there are people that you actually one day look towards becoming when you're younger, I think that's really, really important. I think that it's at the younger age. And I genuinely think if I'd had something like that when I was younger, it may have changed even my career route, potentially. So I think that's a really great initiative, and I know there's many of them. This is just this one that I happen to have been involved with. But I think the mentoring from young, and then obviously just going forward for those that have maybe missed it, as Zena said, there's I think the support, the encouragement, even the mentoring or the coaching later in life is okay too. I think sometimes we get to a certain age where we feel that we're kind of too old now to sort of be doing any of the coaching or mentoring, and I've said this myself. So, but I think it isn't ever too late to think about that, to improve yourself, whether that's just confidence or just talking, as Zena said. Maybe it is around home life. It doesn't have to be children. It could be anything going on. I think just maybe being open about those things. I think we tend, I don't want to generalize, to overthink a lot, women. I know I've heard before about people talking about going to, pitches, and, guys can often rock up and sort of know, 70-80% of it, and they're okay and they're really confident, and us women will turn up and we're like, oh my God, I know 98%, but I let 2% I don't know, and that's probably me. So I'll be, completely freaked out, stressing out until this pitch is done, and I'd still be thinking about it for days after. So I think, the motivating, the support, the coaching, the mentoring at any stage, it's never too late to help with the confidence, and of course knowledge, right? Because knowledge is power too. So I think women have that, but I think it's the other softer skills sometimes that we need maybe some more support with. And just the last thing I'll say before I waste too much time on the same topic is just this concept of other women, like we're doing today with the webinar, meeting other women and knowing that other women are in the same boat. I think that's really interesting, because I closed myself off for a long time just focusing on work and the business, and it's only through networking that I've met a lot of women in similar positions to me who have really helped boost my confidence, not so much in my abilities, but just in me. And that I'm, and they're in the same boat as me, or also give sort of advice around what they do to manage certain situations. So I think that opening the conversation up is and meeting people during these networking events, as Nadine before, as she mentioned, these are really helpful. So thank you, Nicola, for those opportunities.
You're welcome. I just want to add to that, actually, that I do think mentoring has a huge role to play at all stages, even from my own personal experience. 20 years ago, I remember there being some senior women in organizations, and they were, people I looked up to, and also mentors indirectly or directly. But, back then, I think I was very much aware that they were sort of the outliers, the senior holding a senior position. Whereas now I think it's not so much obvious, and I think that's definitely a good example of the progression that we are going through.
Hopefully generation will change things again as we sort of see them coming up again.
Yeah.
Okay, well, no, great, no, thank you. So, sorry, I'm just looking at the time, and it's gone past really quickly. We've got about 12 minutes left of this webinar, so I just wanted to take the opportunity to answer some questions that we've had from our audience. So this is I was going to put this to you all, and if whoever would like to answer it, just go for it. So the question is, can you give your views on seeking young female talent into the industry from a social deprived background?
Yeah, I'm happy to answer that. From our side, we don't have a process where we wouldn't consider anybody. So we give proper conscious bias training to all staff, and it's part of the recruitment process. So, in Jersey, we don't have some of the levels of social deprived that maybe is seen in other places in the world. So, but what we do make sure we do is that when we're doing graduates and interns and everything, we take a broad spectrum, and we also give them all of the same opportunities, all of the same training programs. And we go to the schools as well. We do a lot in the school fairs. So we take someone's secondments when they're still working, and then they can come back and apply on the program. So we try and make sure we are conscious of that, because it's a real thing that I think all businesses certainly need to be. And as you go more global, for example, South Africa, when we get to a certain scale, you'll need to deal with things like black empowerment rules and all sorts of things. And I think they're really positive steps forward for industry, because I think it's right. Diversity and inclusion is not just about female and male. It's much, much broader than that. And we need to be really conscious of all of those factors and how they impact everyone's lives and the business in general.
We personally access most of our, talent through recruitment firms. We do, though, put out for interns on a regular basis, because we think that one way to encourage really great talent in the organisation is to get individuals when they're going through their education, and that can be, A-level and also undergraduate through to obviously individuals that have recently graduated. And they're, we're not looking at all at, we've got no idea, to be frank, about somebody's, personal background and how they've, the environment in which they've grown up. We're just purely there looking at, what have they done through their education in order to have the right experience to come in. And we do sort of basic testing on Excel, for example, for internships. There's no interview as such. So really it's then just purely on someone's, intellectual capability. There is obviously a bar in which you need to meet in order to get through a process, and that tends to be with every organisation the same. When we move into sort of the world of hiring people who are more senior in our organisation, and I'm talking about analysts and above, there, I do definitely rely on recruiters to say to me, look, this is the reason why I think we should interview this person. They may not be sort of every tick box that you may have sort of specified as an employer looking to recruit, and a lot of the time I say to them, well, what are these tick boxes? Because I've not dictated to you any tick boxes, and a lot of the time the recruiters have just got it in their heads that to get into financial services you must have achieved X, Y, Z. I mean, my personal experience is that I didn't graduate. I went to 2 universities and didn't enjoy the experience whatsoever. I'm a co-founder of an investment management business that's successful. Zena, it sounds like you were 16 when you entered financial services. So, I suppose, different backgrounds can add so many different things. And we've talked about diversity a lot with women here, but in Zenzic, it's very much broader than just diversity of gender. It's diversity of thought, it's diversity of background, of experience, and all these things add huge amounts of value, I think, to business decision making. So, anyone who comes from any background, I think they should be encouraged to consider the industry if it's something they're passionate about.
Yeah, I was just going to mention briefly that I know that there's a lot more uptake now in apprenticeships. I know a lot of the investment banks, and we've looked at this as well. So this is sort of pre-university graduates coming into sort of entry-level roles, and I think that's also a great way to have, not just university graduates or postgraduates coming into the finance industry. We're seeing an array of people coming through that, through that way.
Great, thank you. And so another question from our audience, someone in the audience. What qualities or attributes do each of you have that you attribute to your success in your careers? I like this question.
Yeah, I like that question. I talk a lot about grit and determination to the people that are around me, that you really need to have a steeliness in, and I think that's not just in this particular sector. I think this is just about, what does it take to be successful? What does it take to, and success doesn't necessarily need to mean that you become the CEO of a firm. Success can mean just, in respect of your own individual role. But I think, and again, it's not necessarily a diversity point here either, or a gender diversity point. It's purely around what characteristics you have to have in order to, to achieve. And for me, it's that sort of don't give up, be the one to watch, not the person watching, that I think sort of, enables you to really, strive and achieve in your career.
Yeah, I'd agree. It's got to be resilience. Resilience has got to be up there. I think for me, it's authenticity. Be the real you. Don't be the person that people want you to be. Be the real you. Be authentic. Have a real purpose. Understand your why you get up and do this every day, what it means to you. Be kind. I mean, just genuinely treat people how you would want to be treated, and you'll go far, because that's, I think that's the biggest thing. It's you attract what you are. Have a great network. People always say your network is your net worth, and I think as women, it's really important to grow your network, to network as much as you can, and never give up on self-development. I still get laughed at for the amount of books I read and the podcasts I listen to and the meditation stuff I do. But it's really important, and I definitely think we should never ever stop learning.
Yeah, I think I would concur with everything that the other two ladies have said. Really the same kind of characteristics. I think really key to continue to be yourself. I think the authenticity is definitely important. I know historically there's this sort of idea that you have to be a certain way to rise to the top, and maybe more so if you're a female, and I think that isn't the case. I think you should be yourself, find your purpose. In my case, I found that, a bit like Zena said, I think, finding areas that you think that you maybe are weaker at, I always try and identify those and, challenge myself, put myself out there in order to grow and do better. So I think that's something that I do for myself in order to continue to grow. That's not just for work, that's also just a personal point. But yeah, that's pretty much it, I think.
Lovely, thank you. And I think we've got time for just one more question. And someone's asking, is there anything that you think external recruiters or executive search firms should be doing to help promote diversity within the industry?
I mean, I think we're overlapping. I was just going to actually follow on your point, Nadine, which is just that I do think there's a lot of sort of pre-ticked boxes with recruiters. I'm a little bit OCD, so actually in the moments where we have recruited ahead of time, I've given a very specific list, which is very broad about what we want. So they've been fully aware of kind of our expectations, and so I've had to sort of micromanage that a little bit more. But I think typically there are sort of tick boxes that they'll sort of tick that they expect of a firm, whether it's in our case a hedge fund or what have you. So I think it's pushing back on that, at least from my perspective, to make sure that is as broad as it can be. I've said before this, and I think Zena touched on this, this isn't really only about women, right? This is about equity. This is finding the right person for the job, no matter who they are, how they identify, their background, their race. It's the right person for the job, and everyone should have an opportunity to go for it.
I totally agree. Yeah, I think removing the bias from the selection process is so important.
Yeah. I think they should challenge a little bit more. So they just take the brief and accept the brief. And I loved it recently. We did a search and I specifically wanted a female chair, and I interviewed an American firm. And they asked me so many questions. Why do you want a female chair? What does it bring? What's the diversity like on your board? What's your thought process? And they asked me so many questions that I came away and I was a bit like, wow, I've not thought of that. So I think if they challenge you a bit more, your brief might change. And I think that might bring more diversity, more inclusion into what you're doing, because they have such a broad perspective. I mean, this firm that I was talking to, they're recruiting for the biggest firms in the US. So they have such a broad knowledge base that it was great for me, actually. And I found I don't often get that when I go to executive search in the UK. It's just like, what's the brief? Here you go. Great. I've got 5 candidates. So I found that process really insightful.
So I recently received an email from a recruiter, and the title was Gender Diverse Candidates, and it was a female CV that was being speculatively sent on the market in the hope that obviously someone was recruiting for a role. And I thought that was quite interesting because, initially my first reaction was I'm not sure I like that approach, because I want any candidate should probably be looked at for a role and not necessarily because they're a woman or whatever background they came from. But it certainly made me read the email, and I get quite a lot of those speculative emails on a day-to-day basis. So I definitely think that recruiters can spend a little bit more time, I think, considering the season that they are putting across for their roles in making sure that the kind of candidates that they're considering aren't just sort of sent what's out, sort of blindly thinking about sort of the culture and environment that they're going to be coming into. So from my perspective, I don't know if that person is a recruiter that's asked the cost question, but to me, it's less about necessarily, the balance of CVs being sent between male and female, but more linked to the employer environment, considering the current and the candidates that they're dealing with, and getting to know those people well to be able to match the individuals with recruiting.
Thanks very much, Nadine. That's great. Well, I'm afraid that's all we have got time for. It's gone after 4 o'clock, so a little bit of it. But thank you so much to the wonderful women on this panel today. It's been a pleasure to have you on here. So thank you to Nadine, Teresa, Zena, and Nicola. And I think we've had a really, really good discussion, and the time has absolutely flown by. Thank you very much to you all. I know you're all very, very busy women. And thank you to our audience for watching, and thank you to Jersey Finance for partnering with this on our webinar for Funds Europe. Thanks very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.